Victoria, you need to unmute.
Yeah, I did. Oh, okay.
There you are.
Okay. Good evening to everyone, our brothers and sisters. So it's holidays, and I hope that everyone is enjoying the holidays in one way or another, in spite of the situation that we are in. And welcome to our brothers and sisters in the Arabic translation. Likewise to those who are joining us via the YouTube. So as days are coming to close, I guess it is important to look into the past with the letting go and enable us to be able now to look forward to another year where we can create perhaps a better future. So the topic tonight, our sister over here is going to give valuable insights, hopefully to make this night significant, to pack up, learn, and get insights to pack up the past and create the future. So welcome, and we join me in welcoming our sister Judy, Sister Judy, and
Thank you.
for others. Yeah, allow me to have a little background of our sister. Judy Rodgers is currently based in Peace Village, which is the Brahma Kumaris Retreat Center in New York's Catskill Mountains. She has been studying meditation for 30 years. 25 of these is as a Raja Yoga student. Before embarking into this spiritual endeavor, she has worked in media and communications and had taught college English. Her interest is in cultivating inner states that amplify our capacity to live and to serve in these times. And the reason why our sister is here, so for tonight, she's going to share insights, as I've said, to let go how we can pack up the past so that we can create the future. So without much ado, I give the stage to our sister, Sister Judy. Welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. So I'm just going to invite anyone who's online on Zoom to come bring on your camera. It will help me if I'm looking at a face and not just at a name. But I understand that you may not want to do that, and I will endure. Thank you, Hiba. So, we are coming to the end of our 2020 journey. And it wasn't so easy, was it? A year ago, we stood on the brink of this year and we were so hopeful. What would this year be like? And this is a year that's brought us a lot of challenge. And so it may be that we have picked up some things this year when we were traveling through the year that are burdening us a little bit. And so now, as we stand on the brink of 2021, I'm going to chat with you a little bit tonight about what we might want to do to clear the slate so that we can come into 2021 in the right state of mind and heart. It used to be, I used to work with corporations a lot, and they thought nothing of doing long range planning. They were happy to do 20-year plans. So when I was working with companies in 2020, they would be happy to make a 20-year plan. What will life be like in 2020? In 2000, they were happy to look ahead 20 years. But now I find that they don't want to look ahead 2 years. They may not want to look ahead 6 months. And that's because the times have become so volatile that planning, long range thinking and long range planning has become really hard. And so I would say that we might think about this as the age of surprise, that we live in an age of surprise. that we really don't know what's right in front of us. So you think about the year we just had. Of course, when we started the year, maybe some on this Zoom call were prepared for COVID, but I can tell you I wasn't. I went off to India in March. I did have a mask with me, but I wasn't treating it as all that serious. I certainly had no idea that I'd spend the rest of the year and into the next year in a lockdown of some sort. Um, the fires that we had, fires in the Amazon, fires in California, and poor Australia on fire for weeks and weeks and weeks. We had no idea that this was in front of us. All of the unrest in the cities that we saw, Hong Kong and Santiago, Chile, and many cities in the US, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't know this was in front of us. We really didn't have, we weren't able to anticipate this. And so, what happens to us when we go through things like that is that we take on things, we take on worry, we take on fear, we take on other things and that make us heavy and make it hard to operate in the age of surprise, as I'm calling it. You know, the state we need to be in is a state that is sometimes referred to as ever ready, which means that no matter what happens, no matter when you log on to email and the message that comes in, or the headline that comes across your phone, or the phone call that you get from a doctor or a friend, no matter what happens, that you are okay, that you are able to deal with it. So, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about getting ready for this year, being in this state of ever ready. And remember, this isn't a physical talk. So we're not going to talk about having lots of cans of bean and rice on your shelf. And we're not going to talk about what kinds of shortwave radios you might want to have or anything like that. We're just going to talk about spiritual readiness, which is not as simple as it sounds, actually. So I'm going to suggest to you that there are three things that matter. Number one is a peaceful and stable mind. Number two is a clean heart. And number three is trust in the self. And number three is possible because of number one and number two. So let's start with the mind. How do we make the mind peaceful and stable? Um, you can kind of watch your mind and you can see where it goes. It's a little bit hard because as soon as you look for where it goes, it becomes dutiful, right? Like a child, when they know that you're going to look at them, they suddenly are well behaved. But the mind is really, an unmanaged mind is really quite a sight. What happens is the mind tends to connect itself to things in the outside world. And all the things in the outside world are in motion. So the mind hooks on to these things in the outside world and it begins to fluctuate. So, for example, your calendar. When your mind is steady, it'll suddenly think, what's on my calendar for tonight? What's on my calendar for this week? What calls, what meetings, what have I committed to? Right? And then we become kind of absorbed in what we've got on our schedule. The headlines in the news. I mean, I know more about what's going on in COVID in every little corner of the world than I want to know. New cases, new deaths, vaccine progress, etc. We can find ourselves absorbed in these headlines. So the mind is hooking on to these headlines. Um, some minds have a habit of comparing themselves to other people. So the mind will look at another And sometimes the mind has certain people that you kind of compare to. So what's going on with them? What vacations are they taking? What are their children doing? What's going on with their job? What are they wearing? Where are they going? What are they talking about? So the mind can become absorbed in someone else or some multiple people. It can compete. Some minds like to compete. And so they're not just looking at someone else, but they're comparing and they're kind of competing. They're getting ambitious. I could do this better, faster, more. I could apply sooner. I could slip in and try this. So the mind actually stays in a very sort of competitive mind. The mind can get hooked to whatever shows up on the phone. I mean, I've seen so many parents pushing strollers and the baby's in the stroller, but the parent is in yoga with the phone. Um, or people sitting in a group where each of them is on a phone, right? The mind also, some minds think about the past. And I don't know if you can think about your own mind, but these minds will go back to the past and the mind will think about regrets, things that it did that it wished it hadn't done, things that happened that it wished hadn't happened. And it can become quite hooked on this. And you can even find that the mind is replaying certain moments, replaying certain scenes, replaying certain conversations from the past. Now, other people's mind doesn't go to the past so much, but it tends to go to the future. And so a mind that goes to the future tends to be anxious. This could happen, that could happen, things could go this way. And whether it's the stock market or being sick or having an opportunity come or go away, that kind of mind tends to go out to the future and become anxious. The mind also spends a lot of time thinking about the body because we've been in these bodies a long time, right? So the mind can think about the body being healthy. Does the body need to go for a walk? Does the body need more exercise? Does the body need different food? Does the body want different food or drink? Is the body sick? Is the body not feeling so great? The headache, the stomach ache, the this, the that, the aging. You look at the at the body and say, oh no, it's getting older. So the mind can spend a lot of time thinking about the body. And the mind can also spend a lot of time thinking about things that we want. Um, they can be material things that we want. I want an Apple Watch. I want a new microphone. I want a new phone. I want a new whatever. It can be clothes. It can be anything, right? And so the mind can become quite absorbed in wanting. So all of these activities of the mind that I've just described, all of them take the mind into fluctuation. None of those habits of the mind are conducive to having a stable mind. So if the state that we want is to be ever ready, which is kind of poised, right? When you're ever ready, you are completely poised. No matter what comes in front of you, you can respond in just the way you want. But if your mind is hooked on to these things that I've talked about, then you have a number of things happen. One of them is that you're not very discerning, which means when you have a choice to make, you're probably not looking at the right things. So, a discerning mind, when it's faced with a choice, will ask itself, well, how did I get here? What did I do that put me in this place? And a discerning mind will also say, if I make this choice, what will happen? Where will I end up? How will this play out? And make sure that that's the choice that it wants to make. But if the mind is fluctuating, if it's connected with other people and the body and the headlines, etc., we tend to have reactive choices that we regret later. So That's the first problem with this fluctuating mind, is that we make bad choices. We put ourselves in difficult situations because the mind isn't still enough to make good choices. Another problem with this kind of fluctuating mind is that we actually aren't very good company. People around us feel like we're not really listening to them. I mean, we're there, we're physically there, and we may even have trained ourselves to nod meaningfully and look in their eyes, but actually, we may not be hearing a thing they said because the mind is somewhere else. The mind is shopping, the mind is thinking about something from the past, the mind is somewhere else. So we're actually not listening and we're actually not noticing. And the people around us feel that. They feel that they don't have the quality of our attention that they want. The quality of our work goes down, whatever our work is. We're just not able to fully focus. We're too distracted to really give it attention. And not only that, but the personality becomes sort of a restless personality. So when people are around us, they feel our restlessness as opposed to feeling that we're bringing a high quality of attention to them. And in the realm of this being ever ready, we're actually not poised for the moment because we're really not in the moment. So, what do we do with this mind that's betraying us like this? Well, in a little bit later, we'll do a meditation. But simply put, the first thing you have to do is we have to unhook the mind from those things outside. Now, it's not that it's so difficult, but if you have a habit of mind in which the mind is in the habit of thinking about the news, or in the habit of thinking about what it wants, or in the habit of thinking about other people, then it's actually it can be pretty hard to pull the mind out of that habit. But that's the first thing we have to do. We have to turn ourselves from the outside in. We have to become introverted. We have to bring the mind, the face of the mind towards the inside, away from all of that outward focus. Number two, we have to make the mind quiet, which means slowing down the thoughts. Because a distracted mind is thinking like this. Thoughts are just bouncing off like billiard balls, just bouncing off of the mind. Whereas a mind coming into peace, actually the thoughts begin to slow way down. So, step one, you turn inside. Number two, you're slowing the mind down. And then you give the mind one thing to focus on. The mind actually doesn't like to be empty. The mind likes to have something to work with. So you give the mind something to work with. So, for example, a lot of people like to give the mind gratitude because the mind can work with gratitude. What am I grateful for? You're actually slowing your mind down. You're training your mind to come into a state where it's available to you. You can give your mind the thought of peace and let your mind come to a state of peace. What you're doing is you are inviting your mind to come into alignment with the thought that you gave it. So if you gave it fortune, you gave it peace, whatever you gave the mind then quiets and it focuses on that thing. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the mind a little later, but basically that's the first thing we need for this trip, this journey through 2021. We need a stable mind. We need a peaceful mind. And we need to have the ability to make the mind peaceful. I guess that's what I'm saying. Not just that the mind has to be there, but you have to be practiced enough to do that. Now, I'm going to presume that anybody who's on this call this evening has a meditation practice. I hope that's a fair assumption. And this is what you do with your meditation practice, right? I mean, a lot of people use the meditation practice to go to sleep. That's a good thing. It's a good thing to get a good night's sleep, but it's a better thing to use your mind to wake you up. And what I'm talking about here is waking up to the fact that your mind actually doesn't even belong to you. You've given it away if you've got it hooked on to things outside. So this first step for this journey into 2021 is to reclaim your mind. Bring it back to you. Unhook it from all of the external dazzle and glamour and attraction, and bring it back inside and reclaim it. So that's number one, a stable and peaceful mind. Okay, number two is a clean heart. Now, those of you who knew Dottie Janke, Dottie was a friend of mine, and I know for some of you on this call tonight, that she was a friend of yours too, and she talked a lot about having a clean mind. So, what was she talking about? Or clean heart. Um, this year, we've had a lot of heartbreak in 2020. Um, we've lost people. We've we found ourselves living in states of isolation that we hadn't thought we'd live in. We've watched scenes of real sadness, right? Headlines about all these species in Africa that disappeared. The list is quite long. If you live in the US, we've had a lot of unrest around racial issues. I mean, there's a lot of things at work everywhere in the world. And so the hearts can be quite sad and quite burdened. And what Dottie used to say, and what I have found to be true, is that everything starts with the heart. The heart takes in sorrow or worry or anger or resentment or guilt or all that stuff. It also takes in good things, but it takes things in and it tends to harbor them, it tends to hold on to them. And I'll explain the way this works because it's sort of interesting. So, we have an experience. The way this happens in the heart is we'll have an experience. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute. So we have an experience, then we have a feeling about the experience, and then we have a thought about that experience. And we store those in the heart. So I'll give you an example. When I was really little, I was probably 3 years old. I used to like to get up in the middle of the night and go climb in bed with my parents. It made me feel safe. And I did it night after night after night. And at some point, my father would take me back to bed. So one night, I got up and I walked across the hall and I opened the door and I couldn't get the door open. And I felt in the door and I found that they had put a big piece of furniture in front of the door so I couldn't get in. So I then felt sad, right? So experience, they put a piece of furniture in front of the door, feeling I felt sad, and the thought, I'm not very important. They really don't love me. Now, what happens, the way the heart works is the heart stores the memory, the feeling, and the thought about the feeling. It makes like a little thought form. I don't know what to call it. It's a little mass, like a little collection of memories and thoughts and feelings, and it's stored in the heart. Now, I'll give you an example of how these grow. So, a few years later, I had been invited to a birthday party. And so I'm waiting at the window with my present for my friend. And it got later and later and later. And I said to my mother, I think they've forgotten me. And she said, no, I don't think they forgot you. But then it got more later and more later. And finally she said, yes, I think they forgot you. So Now, experience, they forgot to come get me. Feeling, I'm sad. Thought, I'm not important and I'm not very lovable. And that set of feelings and memories gets together with the first one. And now my thought form in the heart is bigger. Do you understand how this works? So these things get stored in the heart and they can be there for decades. They can be there long after we need them. You know, sometimes the things that get stored in the heart actually are helpful to us. You know, we maybe need to be a little cautious. For example, sometimes fear gets stored in the heart, but maybe we need to be a little cautious because maybe it's dangerous where we live. So it's not always that these things aren't useful. But what happens is we store the memory and the feeling and the thought based on the age we are. So we store it based on what we understand at the time. So, what did I understand at 3? Well, I understood they didn't love me because otherwise they wouldn't have put that furniture in front of the door. Now, when I looked back on it decades later, I realized they had 2 children, 3 years old and under, and they were desperate for sleep, right? But that's the perspective of an adult, not a child. And the thing gets stored at the age you are. So I am unlovable gets stored as a 3-year-old. You know, this is the perspective of a 3-year-old, and it doesn't change. It remains in the heart, frozen sort of, as the perspective of a 3-year-old. And I carry it forward in my life as both a feeling and an assessment. Now, the heart can get quite full of these kinds of things because we have so many different experiences. And so, what's the effect of having a heart full of those? Well, many effects. So, for one thing, if I have many experiences of being afraid, let's say that a lot of things happen in my life growing up when I am afraid, then I actually may have a thought form of fear, sometimes called a sanskar, right? A pattern, a thought form of fear that lives in my heart. Now, that can get attached to different things. I might be afraid of the dark. I might be afraid of crowds. I might be afraid of dogs. I might be afraid of loud noises. In other words, the pattern that got stored, the thought form that got stored was fear, but it then attaches itself to many different things. So then when people get to know me, they might have the thought, well, she's just kind of a fearful person, right? That's just kind of who she is. She's just fearful. And when I meet the world through fear, right? I show up a little bit fearful. And so this is true about all of those kinds of feelings that can get stored in the heart. I might have a habit of anger because there were lots of things that made me angry when I was passing through life. I might have a feeling of worry. And people would just say, oh, she's such a worrier. She worries about everything, right? But the pattern of worry is in the heart. So, what happens then is it affects my personality, it affects my relationships, it affects um, it affects the way I meet the world. So back to this question of can I be ever ready? Well, I can't be ever ready if I'm filled with fear. I won't be able to make clear decisions if I'm filled with this kind of fear, or anger, or sorrow, or whatever. And if you are someone who has experienced God's presence, if that's a part of your spiritual experience, that is the biggest liability. You cannot sustain a connection with God. Because when you go inside and attempt to make that connection, what do you end up connected with? Your fear, your memories, your anxiety. That those presences in the heart break our connection and make it impossible for us to have a sustained connection. So we pay a very huge price for having a heart that is not clean. And so Dottie used to talk about how important it is to clean the heart and to clear these things out of the heart. But how in the world do we do that? Right? How do I go back to my 3-year old terror or sadness or whatever and pull that out of the heart? So I'm going to propose to you that there is a way to do this because I have done this myself. It does require a little bit of attention. If we were together having a big long retreat, if I had you here in New York in the mountains with me, we'd take all day and we'd do this together. But I don't have you here. So I'm going to explain to you how to do it, knowing that you can do this yourself. So, first, you may find that you have more than one thing in your heart. In other words, you may have a person in there who you have a lot of bad feeling for, or you may have a pattern in there like fear or anger. You may have multiple things going on in your heart. You have to remove these one by one. At least that's my experience. You can't go in with a big hose and say, okay, everybody out. You kind of have to take them out one at a time. Um, so, what you do, you turn inside, right? Everything starts with turning inside when you're on the meditation path, whether you're stabilizing your mind or you're cleaning your heart. So you turn inside and you have to quietly notice your heart. Now, some of us are visual people. So, if you are a visual person, you might find that, and you'll need to be real quiet. I actually did a little 1-person retreat on my birthday one year with a journal and the whole day to myself. And I did this as part of my 1-person retreat. But if you're a visual person, you actually can envision your heart. And you can envision, now we're not talking your physical heart here, right? We're talking your spiritual heart. You can envision opening the door of your heart and stepping inside. Now, when you do that, you can stand quietly and watch your heart. And you will probably see fairly quickly things that are in your heart. Now, what I do is I write them down because writing is comfortable for me. So I would write down what I found in my heart. The first day I did this, I found 3 things in my heart. And so I wrote those things down, and that was enough to work with, right? And then when you feel you have enough to work with, you step back out of your heart, you close the door of your heart, and now you start a different kind of work. But let me just say, if you're not visual, if you don't see things when you go inside, then maybe you feel things. And so in that case, you feel your way into the heart and you feel what is in the heart. And you can feel if, for example, sorrow or regret is in the heart. You feel it. It's like a little cloud of sadness. Or if you feel that worry is in the heart, or if you have a feeling about a certain person, that they are, a bad feeling about that person. You might even have almost a cartoon character of that person, or a feeling of resistance to them. All of these are things that get lodged in the heart. So whether you're feeling or you're seeing, you make a little list of what is sitting in your heart. And Now, what you're going to do as you do this work is you are going to remove these things from your heart one by one. And the process is pretty simple. Step one, and I did it by writing a little note. So I actually said, Dear thought form of X. You could say, Dear thought form of fear. I see that you are in my heart. So, in other words, you are addressing the thought form that you have made from your memories and your feelings and your thoughts. Because anything you have made, you can unmake. So, dear thought form of worry, I see that you are in my heart. And if you know why it's there, you can even say, I know why you're there. Because when I was growing up, there was so much to worry about that it was a way that I protected myself. If you don't know why it's there, no problem. You don't have to know why it's there. And you say to it, it's time for you to go. Right. So in my case, it was time for me not to feel that I wasn't important and not to feel unlovable. I mean, that feeling had been there for like 40, 45 or 50 years by the time I found it. It was no longer relevant. I was plenty lovable. I was plenty important when it mattered. So I needed to take that out. So I said to it, it's time for you to go. You have to go. And then in my mind's eye, I walked it out of my heart. And then I filled my heart with love. Now, let me explain this. So, do you know how, if you sit in front of the television every night, night after night, what happens on the couch? There's a little dent there, right? Where you sit every night. You know that little place? It's like where you plop yourself down every night. It's right like that. That's how your heart is. If you have been worried for 25 years, then that worry has a place in your heart. So when you walk it out of your heart, you have to fill your heart with the remedy feeling. So if worry was what you found, then fill your heart with trust or faith or confidence. If fear was what you found, you might fill your heart with the same things, with fear, with love. If sadness was what you found, if you were just deeply sad, then you fill your heart with happiness. You invoke that feeling. If you have a relationship with God, you invoke it from that source. If you don't, if you've never had that experience, you invoke it from yourself. But you have to replace the thing you just took out. Understand? If you've removed it, you have to put something in, or else it will come pulling right back in. Now, let me say a little bit. Some people have in their heart a feeling of blame, a feeling that someone did something so bad to them that they cannot forgive them, that they were harmed in a really big way by this person. And I'm going to propose to you that if that's what you found in your heart when you did this, that you have to add one step of forgiveness. Now, I know that sounds really hard. If you feel that the person did something really, really bad, but you know what? You're forgiving them for yourself. You are forgiving them to clear your own heart. Because the longer you hold the blame, the more heaviness you have in your heart, and it affects your personality. It affects your peace of mind and your peace of heart. It affects your ability to form relationships. It affects your ability to connect with God. So, if you found blame, you have to do a kind of forgiveness, And I think the best way to do the forgiveness is to something like this. You say, dear thought form of, and it might be a thought form of a person, depends on what you're blaming. Let's say you're blaming a person. Dear thought form of my teacher or my father, I see that you are in my heart. And I know why you're there, because you did this thing that caused me great sorrow. However, at the time that you did this, you must have thought that that's what you needed to do. And though I took great sorrow from that, at this point, for the peace of my own heart, I forgive you completely for what you did. And I release you completely from any further responsibility to me about this. And then you really let that go. You can imagine hooking it on to a helium balloon and it floats away. You can put it in a boat and float it down the river. You are getting this out of your heart. Now, you can't just do this in words. You have to actually feel this. And you have to realize that the reason you're doing it doesn't have very much to do with the other person. You are doing this to free your own heart. Now, the other thing, if you found blame, if you found guilt in your heart, sometimes we feel we have done something so bad that it cannot be forgiven. The thing I did was so wrong that I cannot be forgiven, and I am perpetually guilty about it. And I would just say to you, there is nothing that cannot be forgiven. Everyone makes mistakes. And it's really important to get it out of your heart. So, in the same way that you did forgiveness, you can do an apology. And you're not going to get in the car and drive over to somebody and apologize to them. Half the time, the people aren't even here anyway. Gone on. What you're doing is you are doing it in your heart. So you say, dear thought form of, and chances are it might be stored as a victim, someone, the person you did the thing to, or it could be stored as a scene. But you say, dear thought form of X, I see that this guilt is in my heart and it's preventing me from living in freedom and happiness. And so, for the freedom of my heart, I apologize for what happened at the time that I did that. It's what I thought I had to do. I see now that it has caused harm, and I apologize for that. And I release myself from any further responsibility for this. And then you fill your heart with love. Got it? So, you have to be a little bit vigilant about this because these things that have come into our hearts, it's a habit the heart has. So once you have removed it from your heart, you have to watch your heart to make sure it stays clean. And so you have to make sure that this thing, that you don't pull it back in, because that's how it would come back in. You would pull back the sorrow, or you would pull back the guilt because it was familiar. And you don't want to do that, because your commitment, in order to go into this next part of the journey, in order to go into 2021, your commitment is to have a peaceful mind and a clean heart. So you don't want to allow any of that to come back in. Now, I would say about the third thing, once your mind is at peace, and once your heart is cleared of this kind of thing, then you can really trust the self. Until that time, it's a little bit hard to trust the self because we don't know if the self is going to go to some bad habit, right? Some habit of guilt or sorrow or anger or whatever. But once you've done that work in your meditation, then you actually can trust the self. So, this is really good meditation practice. It's pretty deep. You'll need quiet, you'll need time, but I know you can do this. I have total confidence you can do this. And this sets you up to go into 2021 in a completely different space, a peaceful mind, a clean heart, really trusting the self and ever ready, right? You're poised. So no one can give you some surprise you can't respond to with deep discernment, understanding exactly what you have to do. Now, if you were here with me, I would ask you what other thoughts you have or what other questions you have. I'd like to take you into a meditation, but let me just stop and see if anyone has a question that you want me to. Okay, trusting this self. Okay, so let's talk about what it means to trust the self. So when I when I trust myself, I'm not going to ever do anything that I have regrets about. When I trust myself, I'm going to trust that I will always show up as my best self. That when I need to be empathetic, I will be empathetic. When I need to accommodate somebody else's big moment, maybe they're angry or they're upset, that I won't react, but I will restrain myself and I'll allow them to have whatever mood they're in. And I'll have good wishes for them. You know, when I trust myself, I know that I can bring pure feelings and good wishes to the situation no matter what, no matter who is in front of me. Mother in law, former husband, know, boss that's upset me, that I'm not going to be so fragile that I'm always reacting and doing things I regret. Because when we react and do things we regret, then we set in motion this whole karmic cycle. Then I have to pay back this thing I've reacted about. So trusting the self means that I trust the self to bring the very best I have forward. That I can be responsive, I can be reflective, I can be quiet when I need to be quiet. I can pull on whatever strength I need in the moment. I can face and react really quickly if I need to. If it's an emergency and I need to be there, I know I'll be there. I'll have courage in the moment. I'll have whatever I need. So that's what it means to trust the self. But we really can only trust the self when the mind is at peace, which means it's not tethered out there, it's inside. The mind is pulling on inner resource and the heart is clean. I've gotten these things out of the heart. Now I can hear the heart. I can hear the mind. I can trust them. I hope that helps. Anything else? Okay, so why don't we close with a little meditation? So I'm assuming you're all meditators, but I want you to sit so you're comfortable. You can either put your feet on the floor or you can fold your feet underneath you. Make sure your neck is above your spine. And you're going to start by quieting the mind. So I've shared a lot of things with you in the last 45 minutes, and they may be flying around your mind. So allow all of those things and anything else that's in your mind to land quietly, kind of like birds landing on a telephone wire. And you'll feel your thoughts slowing down. Until your mind becomes still. And when your mind is still, you'll feel your breath quietly moving inside. You know, it's always there. But when your mind is still, you can feel the rhythm of your breath. And now give your mind one thought. Give your mind the thought of peace. And so with your in-breath, breathe in peace. With your out-breath, release anything that is not peace. And then you'll find that your mind is silent, filled with peace, and completely silent. Now allow your attention to go to your heart. And as you know, there are many things in the heart. So open the door of your heart and allow anything that you don't need in the heart to flow away. And become aware of what's the seed of the heart, which is love and kindness. So allow your heart to fill with love and kindness. And since we are vibrational beings, these vibrations of love and kindness move beyond the heart into the cells of the body. Filling us with love and kindness. And then beyond the body, into the atmosphere of the room where we're sitting. A room filled with love and kindness. And then beyond the room, out into the world, touching every soul you know, everyone you've ever met, everyone you've ever thought about, with feelings of love and kindness. And then beyond the ones you know, to all of those you don't know, and then beyond those you don't know, to the natural world and everything in it, the oceans, the sky. Now bring your attention to the place behind the eyes and the forehead, sometimes called the seat of the soul. Become aware of yourself here. You are an eternal point of light. You are a spark of life. Experience yourself as that eternal light. Have the awareness. I am completely at peace. I am completely loving. I am powerful. And I am ever ready. I'm poised for this journey into the year ahead. And I trust myself completely, knowing that in each moment, I'll know just what to do for the highest good. And now, holding on to the peace, the love, the trust. Bring yourself back to this moment, knowing that the world needs you in this state of readiness. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So, what can we say, sister? But really, so much, I would say, think the heart is so overwhelmed that you have provided us a way to inspire of how we can move on and really get free ourselves from any past. It's just a matter of a decision that we have to take to move on. So anyhow, sister, we have some questions that have come in. So shall I start with a question from the Arabic group? And this is the question: how can I stop my mind from thinking about the past all the time? It was mentioned, but I think they need more clarifications for this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a habit, right? And if you've ever changed any habit, what you have to do is first you hold a clear intention. I have the intention to change the habit of my mind. You have to hold that intention really strongly. Then you have to catch yourself as you're doing it. Now, the first time, what you'll probably catch is you'll catch yourself after you did it. And you'll say, oh, no, I was going to stop that. But then the next time, you might catch yourself in the middle of it. And so, as you're having that thought of the past, you stop yourself in the middle and you replace that with a powerful thought. You can think about the present moment you're in and bring all the love and happiness and joy and strength and power to this present moment. And you have to do that over and over again. At the beginning, you will think you're going crazy because the thoughts come so often. You'll think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to conquer this. But if you stay with it after the first day or two, you'll notice they come less often. And if you really stay with it, by the second week, you'll see your habit is really starting to change. But you have to pay a lot of attention and you have to catch yourself. Some people write about it in their journals. If you're a journaler, you can do it in your journal. But the main thing is you have to have a strong intention and then you have to intervene as it happens. All right? And replace the thought. You can't just stop the old one. You have to replace it with the thought you want to have. So 3 steps. Have an intention, intercept the thought you don't want to have, and replace it with the thought you do want to have.
Sounds easy, but doable. Okay, we move on to the next question. If the heart is beyond the mind and intellect, how the heart could visualize?
Well, what the heart visualizes, the heart, and it doesn't in everybody, right? Not everybody has a visual presence inside. Um, we've got some feedback. Yeah, okay. So, but if you are a visual person, you might make up a picture of what's in the heart. So, a visual person might envision almost, if there's a person, let's say there's a person that you have a lot of blame for, a visual person might have almost a little cartoon character of that person. You know, there's my mean mom, in my heart. I can see her, my mean mom. Um, uh, and so if you're visual, you work with your visual habit. If you're not visual, don't worry about it, right? Just work with the feeling. The feeling is disappointment, or the feeling is sorrow, or the feeling is um fear or whatever. Then just work with that feeling. Don't try to become visual if you're not, because it's not for everybody, but some people it's a very strong thing that goes on inside.
Okay, worth trying, sister. And the next question is how to deal with unhappy situation.
You mean a current situation that's ongoing?
It
Is
just
that what
says
it
here,
means?
yeah, somebody
Unhappy,
says unhappy.
an unhappy situation.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it's the same, right? So the world does not always give us happiness, right? The world does not always give us a beautiful scene. Sometimes unhappy things happen to us. When I talked about trusting the self, the reason you work on your life through meditation is you're developing strength. You're developing the ability to bring something new to the situation. So if the situation has a lot of anger in it, the easy thing to do is to let me just be angry, right? Because everybody's angry. So now I'm angry. We have this mistaken thought that if my friend is sad, then I have to add my sadness. I have to show my friend how much I care. Now I'm sad. But the friend doesn't need any more sadness, right? The friend already has sadness. So becoming spiritually powerful means that I think, what does the situation need? So if the situation is unhappy, does it need my unhappiness? No, it's already got unhappiness. It needs my happiness. So my ability to invoke happiness from my own heart is what allows me to serve. If all I'm going to do is react and kind of, if they're sad, I'm sad. If they're worried, I'm worried. If they're angry, I'm angry. What are you giving? You're not serving. You're not bringing anything to it. But if they're unhappy, they need your happiness. If they're worried, they need your confidence. If they're angry, they need your peace. So you've got to learn how to invoke that in your own heart. And that's why if your heart's clean, you can do that. But if your heart's got all that stuff in it, you won't be able to do that.
Okay. So here's something about not the external situation, but something of the self. How do you get rid of feeling that you did not do enough?
That you didn't do enough. Well, that's a kind of guilt, right?
Yeah.
That's a kind of guilt. And so when I was talking about guilt, what you have to do is first you have to, I would say, forgive yourself. Because what you're doing is you're bringing to yourself a bad feeling. You know, guilt is a bad feeling. Guilt is somehow I failed. Either I didn't do what I should have done or I did what I shouldn't have done. And so guilt is a very heavy. It's like a big fog that comes and sits in the heart. So first you have to forgive yourself and you have to say pretty much something like, "Hey, at the time I did what I felt I could. At the time, I did what I felt I could. Now I see that maybe I could do more. And so now I'll make a commitment to do as much as I can." But there is no benefit in beating yourself up because in the past you didn't do enough, because the past is gone. That train has left the station. So if you are constantly thinking about the past and you're filled with guilt, the mind is not at peace and the heart is not clean. Right? So you're not going to be able to bring to this journey what you need. So you have to have a lot of strength to do what I'm saying. This is not for the faint-hearted. This is for a strong Mahavir, right? A good, strong yogi soul.
So worth trying, sister. Okay. Talking about forgiveness, how should I forgive a friend's deception?
Well, it's as I said, when you're forgiving, you are not forgiving because they deserve it. I'm getting some feet, yeah, there. You are forgiving to clear your heart. Your friend may have done a very bad thing, but you are the one in bondage. Do you see what I'm saying? As long as you carry blame in your heart, you are in bondage, not the friend. The friend's living their life, but you are the one with the bondage in your heart, the heaviness in your heart. So you are going to forgive them to free your own heart. But you have to really forgive them. You can't pretend to forgive them. That won't work. You have to say, "I forgive you completely for the way that you deceived me. At the time, you must have thought that's what you had to do. And I took sorrow from that. But for the freedom of my own heart, I forgive you for what you did and I release you from any further responsibility for this."
So, sister, this has something, I think this is related to what you're saying. Maybe you can have something about this. So, it's about relationship, how to get engaged with someone after years of painful separation. How can I convince someone to get engaged with someone after years of painful separation?
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the situation, but you know, um, you cannot control what someone else is feeling. We cannot control what someone else is feeling. So if someone else has pain, we cannot talk them out of their pain. All we can do is manage our own mind and clean our own heart. That's it. We can't do anything for them. So you focus on the pain, the memories you have, and you say, I am carrying a lot of sorrow about those. So I am going to walk that sorrow out of my heart. I'm going to replace that with happiness. And I myself am going to commit to live in happiness. And anytime those memories come back, I'm going to remove them and replace them with happiness until the heart accepts happiness. But you cannot do anything about someone else's sorrow.
A follow-up to that, sister. But does forgiveness mean I have to consider them good again and accept them back as friends? Because I don't feel comfortable with their energy
I don't
around
think
me.
you don't have to accept him back as a friend. But I wouldn't make a judgment, good or bad. Don't judge at all. People are what they are, right? You have to accept whoever people, whatever someone is, we just accept whoever they are. If someone is weak, we don't say, well, when you get strong, I'll love you. When you get strong, I'll be with you. We just say, hey, whatever's true for them, let me just accept the way they are. This is what a yogi soul does, right? Someone who's got a good, strong meditation practice accepts the world the way it shows up. They don't regret. I hate that the world shows up this way. I want people to show up happy in my life. I want people to be loving in my life. I want people to be kind in my life, but they're not kind. And so I'm upset. You say, where does that get us? Right? So people show up the way they show up. I am managing my heart. So if I forgive someone to clear my heart, I may say to them, good wishes to you. Just good wishes. May your life go well. May you learn many things. May you find happiness. That doesn't mean you have to accept them back as a friend. Just have a good wish for them, a good, pure wish that they do well.
Yeah. So before we close in, sister, there is somebody who would want to, or maybe some of them too, who would want to get in touch with you, to connect with you. I think you have opened up the Pandora. So I think
Sure.
there are other issues that might that they
No
might want
problem.
to take with you. Now, how to get in touch with you?
I think the best is to come in through Sister Ancia, and then she
Okay.
can forward things. We're in touch a lot, so
Yeah.
she can. All right.
Okay, so yeah, we are here in the Bari Meditation Center for those who would want. So through email or phone, get in touch with Sister Ansuya, and the line will be connected or in any way to our sister. So, sister, really for tonight is quite significant. One, you have put that awareness that we hold the key to our peace, to our happiness. But the question is, how are we going to use this key, the key of the mind? And you really have provided so much clarity and doable things of what we can do before we close in the year of the 220, but to really move on with that inspiration. And tonight, you really have provided that inspiration. So, what better gift can we ask for the coming new year? So, I think this will bring in bright new year for us, for the world. And thank you for this inspiration,
All
sister.
right.
So, in
Happy
behalf
New
of
Year.
everybody, okay, of every one of us, the meditation center, and we look forward to having you around here whenever it would be
One of these
possible.
days, huh? All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you all.
So stay
Happy New Year.
safe. Yeah, take care and happy New Year too.
Happy New Year. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everyone. Thank you to
Okay.
everyone.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.